Kim Jaussi is Associate Professor of Organizational Leadership and Behavior. Is that correct? Okay. Sorry. And her interests in leadership specifically and what enables a person to become not only a successful leader, but a good leader, has a lot to do with personal qualities and characteristics that she is focused on in her research and her work in the field. She speaks to people about the importance of identity and diversity, and in particular, the essence and the necessity that creativity be part of a leadership's and a leader's role. And that's what she's going to talk about today, about the significance of creativity. And in the sequence of our talks today, again, to put it back in perspective, there are these things, forgiveness and envy, that consume energy out of our system. And so they deserve some work. And what do we do when those things are addressed? And we have now this restored energy. What can we now practically use that energy for to piece together our lives so that we are actually effective leaders of our own existence? So that's the next conversation.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm used to saying good morning, so good afternoon. What a privilege it is to be here looking out and seeing my current students and my former students. There's so many of them that have come today. Thank you. And all the alumni. It's just an honor to work here. And part of the reason that I love my job so much is because of what I'm going to talk about today. How many of you would say, I'm a creative? How many of you are creative people in ad agencies or artists? What are creative? Okay. For those of you who aren't, I was just like you. I'd like you to close your eyes for a minute. We've done a lot of eye closing. We're going to do it again. And I'd like you to remember when you were probably 4, 5, 6, 7, whenever, you did something really creative, something really awesome. You drew something really funky in school. You built something really cool in your backyard. You imagined something. You drew a story. You wrote a story. You thought of ninjas leaping from the moon, whenever, right? And think about if somebody stopped that process for you. Told you perhaps that the flowers you drew weren't the right color. The flowers are supposed to be in rows. Or if your pinch pot was crooked. Or if your story was unrealistic. Or if your idea was just false. Who has a story like that? Any time in their life somebody took something they did, they thought it was great, it was new, you loved doing it, and somebody told you it wasn't good. Anybody? Everybody? Lots of people? Yeah. And that's too big of a number. I was one of those. I was brought up by a Wharton finance, son of an immigrant who became an orphan, hardcore, analytical. Harvey's not going to believe that, are you? And I was taught that logic is what ruled, and I was super logical and had a bright future ahead of me, either as a finance person or a lawyer. And I was like, really? Because I feel a little funky, and I really love to draw, and I really want to do something fun. And I was pushed very much towards academic classes. And when I got to 8th grade, I signed up for ceramics. I don't think I told my parents. And I was so happy, like mucking around in the not dough, what I recall, clay. And I loved it. I loved it because it was just out of my head and into my body. And one day, after making pinch pots, they pulled me aside. And the teacher took me to the principal's office. Oh, I was a good kid. And I'm like, principal's office. And they sat me down and they said, we're really concerned about the effects of this class on your GPA. You're a very bright girl. You have straight A's. But your pinch pot is well below standards. Kid you not. 8th grade. We recommend you select a more academic elective. I will never forget that phrase. I signed up for Spanish 3, got an A, never touched a creative class again. Never took an art class, never even got near an art history class because I felt so far removed. Became an economics major. Went back to that brain. And so I was told that I was not creative It wouldn't be possible for me to learn it. In fact, I should stay away from it in order to protect my future. And I always felt awful about that. I felt so sad because I thought creative people were so cool, and I wanted to be one. But my identity was like, I want to be that, kind of like Martha Stewart, right? You want to be like her if you want, but you can't be. So I wanted to be a creative, but I couldn't be. So I had lots of really cool creative friends who were, but I wasn't. And it was a struggle for me. And I stayed in my head as an economics major and worked in brokerage houses and did finance kind of work and was miserable. Miserable. I was good at it, but I was miserable. And I was like, what's missing? And in the meantime, I rode and trained horses. And any of you have seen the article about my work with horses and leadership in the alumni magazine or the research magazine, you've seen my horses and me, my baseball hat on. But that was my outlet, was to be outside. And so nature became my place where I could be creative and I could think about training horses in creative ways. And I realized that I was tackling really challenging horses and coming up with creative solutions, that I was kind of creative. And I thought, And when I started really studying leadership, I realized that all of the good leaders solve problems in really creative ways. And so it came to me that creativity is something very different than just whether or not you can make a pinch pot. Thank you very much. 8th grade. I can't remember the name of that teacher, but boy, I wish I could have a conversation now. I got to work with Fred here on that one. I got to let go of that. And what I've learned is that it comes down to believing that you are creative and that you can be creative. Now, why? Why does it come down? It comes down to that in terms of the construct, but why should we even try to do it? And what does it have to do with well-being? Research has shown again and again and again, much like with what Fred said, what Christopher said, what Michael's going to continue to say, and what Matt's going to tell us, we will be healthier. We will be more resilient. We will be more productive. We will live longer. We will be happier. We will be more satisfied if we can be creative. Wow. The 8th grade teacher didn't know that, apparently, right? So how can we do that? There was only a few hands up when I said who's creative. So how can we do that? We can practice. And creativity, just like the theme of everything here, is part mind, cognitive skills. There are skills you can learn that will give you new and cool and inventive solutions. We can train your brain, just like Fred was talking about, different avenues and neurons literally start to connect that have never connected before if we employ these skills. And later today, you're going to get a handout that involves some skill-building exercises from all of us. You'll see an exercise in there. But we also have to open up our hearts. And letting go and allowing positive energy, we know physiologically opens new neurons in your brain to allow new connections to form. So when you get happy, a la Fred, or you get rid of envy and your heart gets warmer and fuzzier, right? You're going to be able to see things slightly differently. And that's one of the skills that you can work on, how to look at things and how to see. And then when you get down to your authentic self and your soul, you really can follow your passions and get into what we call flow, which research has shown allows entire physiological and neurological pathways to open up and allow connections to form. You'll see in your handout a little picture of something like this. And you probably can't tell, but this rock has a hole in it all the way through it. And it was made by nature. It was made by water, going through the rock over all the years and putting little holes. But to find these on the shores of where I vacation, Seneca Lake, took me 4 years before I could find my first one. 4 years. They're called lucky stones. My daughter, who happens to be on the autistic spectrum, could walk up and find 10 in 2 minutes. It made me nuts. And as a good analytical person, I was like, if I try harder, I look harder, I can find them. The harder I tried, the less I could see, right? And we do that all the time in our minds because we don't let these things open up inside of us. And we need to learn how to do that. So my hope for you is that you learn to see differently, take time, do the meditation kind of exercises, put yourself into nature where you feel inspired, where you can just stop and look at things and deconstruct them by the attributes that they have that you wouldn't necessarily normally look at. Look at rocks and see if they have holes in them. Look for lucky stones. And also think about things you do that you're very passionate about, boat building, your hobbies, your soul food. And break down attributes of those characteristics, those hobbies, and use them when you're solving problems. Super example, if I'm working with a strategy client or research study or problem and strategy for a large organization, the question, well, you're struggling with diversification. How do horses handle that when there's different options for food? And people go, what? What are you talking about? There's a random Kim question again. But we stop and we break down and we think, and it gives us entirely new solutions that we hadn't yet thought of, and allows your brain to do some exercise and tap your heart at the same time. So my hope for you all is that you realize you can be creative. You are creative. You feel that in your heart, soul, and your identity. You use your brain and practice the skills, and that you go out and try to find some lucky stones. Thank you.